Hi guys, welcome back to another GJ video review. Today we're checking out this new case from Corsair. It's the Air 540. It's a rather interesting design. It's a dual-sided case.
Oh boy, what a blast from the past. That was me 12 years ago when I looked at the original Air 540. This is the Air 5400, which we'll be taking a look at today. So we saw this at Computex. Not really a case for custom water cooling. I am going to do a custom loop, but I'm also going to do a more traditional all-in-one cooled loop as well. So let's jump in and get started. The Corsair Computex booth this year was absolutely packed, and by far most people were crowded around the Air 5400. With its futuristic ducting, hidden AIO placement gave us vibes we've never seen before. This is the new successor to the OG game changer Air 540 roughly 12 years ago. Corsair has sent me both models, which come in black and white, and I'll be doing custom builds in both, a full AIO BTF build in the black and a half stealth custom loop in the white. You'll find two different models, an Air 5400 RS-R and an Air 5400 LX-R, RS coming with 3 RS reverse fans and the LX coming with 3 LX reverse fans, while the LX version also comes with an IQ Link system hub. Obviously the LX version is going to cost a bit more. The Air 5400 is a dual chamber chassis, but it takes that dual chamber meaning just that little bit further with now the AIO going around the back as well. Or you could call it a triple chamber case, motherboard and fans in the main, PSU and storage around the back, and then the all-in-one cooler in its own third chamber. And I'll talk about this crazy third chamber later on when I cover AIO support in the chassis. The case has not 1, not 2, but 3 swing out doors, which definitely makes it easier getting inside the case, and to be honest, it just looks so cool. The 2 main doors can be removed if required. Overall quality feels nice, and the chassis is solid with very minimal flex to it once all panels are removed. Raised 27mm off the ground helps for good air intake, as that's what this case is all about. It also means transporting the case around is just that little bit easier, as you can get a good grip on any side of the case. Chassis dimensions come in at 469 high, 340 wide, and 468 deep. Not particularly a tall case, but being dual chamber, it is quite wide. The 2 tempered glass side panels are 4mm thick, and on the white model, we have a 100% clear panel, and on the black model, I'd say there is a very light tint. As mentioned earlier, these panels swing open and close and are only held in via push and clips. I found once closed, they were in super tight and feel they won't accidentally open when transporting the case. A small notch on the chassis for each side panel can be found to help grip and open each panel. Only one pre-installed removable dust filter can be found at the bottom for the 3 intake fans, while another dust filter can be found in the accessory pack, which gives you the option for installing it on the front panel for your AIO. I did notice there is no magnetic dust filter for the inside of the back panel for the PSU cutout. Case I/O is found at the top towards the front, and what can I say? Going no Type A was a bold move. Let me know your thoughts on this, as no Type C to Type A adapters were provided in the accessory box. Here you'll find 3 USB Type C only, yellow being 20 gigabits and the other 2 being standard 5 gigabit USB, which go to your internal USB 3 header on your motherboard. Then we have an audio combo port and the power button with built-in power LED. No reset button. Moving inside the Air 5400, we once again find Corsair's new Rapid Route 2.0, which was found in the recently launched frame 5000D. This essentially turns the whole motherboard tray into a modular pegboard, allowing unlimited zip tie points, as well as Corsair's own clip-in Velcro ties. This motherboard tray is also removable, just like on the frame 5000D, via 4 screws at the back. Motherboard support is up to EATX, and my test ROG Extreme installed fine with no issues with cable routing. One thing to note is my test ROG Extreme motherboard's rear I/O cover was right up against the top air duct. This is something to be mindful of, and you might need to remove this ducting if your motherboard fails on this. You will most likely also need to remove the bottom air intake duct when installing your motherboard for bottom screw hole access. Now this is where things get funky, as no cable grommets are found on the Air 5400, but instead Corsair have gone with a single large cutout from top to bottom along the motherboard tray. This gap is then covered with what I would call bristles, similar to what's found on a paintbrush. I think this works well, and it's nice to find something refreshing than traditional grommets. Also, this has a second purpose to help seal off the main chamber from the back chamber, as this chassis is all about airflow. You'll also find 2 large cable cutouts along the top for EPS and fan connectors, with some nice Velcro cable straps at the back to help routing. I also found the back connect motherboard cutouts also worked well for smaller cables to pass through. And then there's one single long cutout along the bottom. Back connect is also supported in the Air 5400 and I had no issues with my test, B850 Tough BTF, MSIZ 890 SPZ, and the ARS X870 Stealth Ice motherboards. One interesting feature, which was also found on the Frame 5000D, is that Corsair include a magnetic mylar strip that covers and cleans up the gap when using back connect motherboards. Further to this motherboard tray cable management, Corsair have added a second layer management tray around the back to help route cables. This is for front I/O cables, as well as to help guide right side edge motherboard cables through to the rear and into your PSU. This also uses the Rapid Route 2.0 design, and this tray can be completely removed via a single screw if you do not wish to use it. Max GPU length is roughly 360mm and not the 430 Corsair state, and I'll explain why soon. I had no issues with my test ROG Strix 4090, and also here's a shot with the Red Devil Spectral White, a slightly smaller card, as the chassis comes with bottom and top air ducts. There is roughly 95mm of clearance for GPU thickness if using the most common slot on your motherboard, which is this one. You can see this Noctua 5080, which is 80mm thick, clears, and I don't think you'll find a thicker card on today's market. But there is one problem. This Noctua 5080 doesn't actually seat properly into the motherboard correctly and is actually fouling on the air duct in the AIO chamber. Like, you could remove the AIO air duct, but this is really what this case is about. So after remeasuring, max GPU length is more like 360mm and not 430 if you wish to keep the AIO air duct. GPU width for water-blocked cards for anyone actually wanting to custom loop, in this case, is roughly 180mm, and my test ROG Strix 4080 with a thermal take block installed with no issues. An anti-sag bracket is also pre-installed in the chassis, and this is the same one found in the Frame 5000D. I found this worked okay, but adjustment is limited to just up and down. If using an EATX board, this needs to be removed. For CPU air cooler height clearance, there is 180mm. Around the back for PSU support, we find max PSU length is 200mm and is located roughly in the middle right behind the motherboard. The power supply is fixed in this spot to allow for back motherboard connections. If running longer power supplies like my test 210mm Seasonic, things start to get tight and you may have to remove that rear vertical cable tray. Storage is located directly under the PSU, and I found this to be a bit lacking. A single caddy can be found supporting two 2.5-inch SSDs on the inside and a single 3.5-inch hard drive on the outside. If not using a hard drive, this area can be used to house something like the IQ Link System hub, and this is how the LX model of the Air 5400 comes. Although I did notice the bottom of the chassis at the back has plenty of space and features the same Rapid Route design, so you could probably house a few extra 2.5-inch SSDs down there. A missed opportunity, as some extra SSD sleds could have been installed here. For rear cable management, we have the Corsair Rapid Route 2.0, where the whole back panel can be used for tie-down points. I'll cover my cable management at the end once my builds are complete. Moving on to cooling, and the Air 5400 has three main locations: top, bottom, and front. All these locations support up to 360mm radiators only, or three 120mm fans. The chassis has no 140mm fan support at all, so keep that in mind. All three locations have removable fan brackets as well. Some things to take note here in regards to the top and bottom locations. The air ducts are only designed to be used in conjunction with fans up to 30mm thick. If installing an AIO at the top of the chassis, the top air duct needs to be removed. This isn't really a performance hit, as the top duct is really only there for aesthetic purposes to keep it cohesive with the bottom air duct. If for some reason you do want to use an all-in-one cooler at the top, max thickness here is 55mm, and let me know what you think about the styling on these two clear air ducts. At Computex earlier this year, they were completely clear. Now they have the very tiny etched prints of Corsair white pattern seen on other areas of the case. It will be interesting to see how RGB looks through these ducts, and we will check that out in the final builds. Moving to the front fan location, and this is the dedicated AIO spot which has been specifically designed for this chassis. This area is quite simple, as the all-in-one cooler is separate to the rest of the case. Cool air comes in from the front through the radiator, then straight out of the case via this clear duct. There is roughly 80mm of thickness here for all-in-one coolers, and for someone wanting to go with a custom radiator, I'd keep rad thickness to no more than 40mm. This is because radiators on AIOs aren't as wide, so they will fit slightly better here. This duct can be removed to help route your AIO tubes through over to the motherboard side. Then you can install the clear duct back in after. More of this paintbrush bristle design can be found on top of this duct to help restrict air to this chamber only. So that is most of the review there. Before we look at the two final builds, I just want to let you guys know that I do take photos of all of the final builds that I do. I throw them up on my website. I'll put the two links in the description, one in the black, one in the white build, just for you to check them out, because I often get messages asking for high res photos of my builds. So I have all those for you to check out, and you can set them as wallpaper, do whatever you want with those. So let's check out the final builds. So we have the two builds here, the full white, the full black. Now I wanted to do two builds because I kind of felt it was a little bit unfair just doing the white only. I do love my white builds. You saw in that setup behind me how good this looked on that all white setup, but I had to do quite a few modifications in this chassis to get this stealth CPU block to work. So this is one here. I'll talk a little bit about this later on and sort of the issues I had and how I overcame them. So I thought instead of ending the video on having to hack up this case, of course I wanted to do more sort of generic build in the black chassis that uses a traditional Corsair all-in-one cooler, uses the standard GPU. Well, this is the BTF, I wouldn't say it's standard, but uses more a traditional GPU. Now I want to talk about cable management first, and then we'll go down the list to the other things. Had no issues at all around the back. I can just open this up now, and I really do like how it's just on that hinge. You don't have to take the side panels off all the time. You just swing it open. But yeah, no issues with cable management. I even used a long 200mm PSU, and all of my cable bulk just went behind that hard drive caddy or the hard drive sled, whichever you want to call it. And I just tucked it all up there. Super clean, no issues at all. You can even see down the bottom where that rapid route cable management tray is, just completely bare. It's kind of like they need something else there. I really think those two extra, probably nearly fit 3 extra SSD sleds if you wanted to for extra storage. And I even managed to keep that the vertical cable tray as well. So that was no issues at all. I do want to bring up the longer card issue as well. I reached out to Corsair about the GPU length being 430 for their measurements. That's 430mm. That's from basically here. And when they measured, they went from here all the way to the inside of the glass. Now, I'm assuming when they did the spec list for this or the clearances and stuff, the Noctua 5080 wasn't available then, and that is by far the longest card at the moment. And then it's hard to kind of gauge, but the clear duct in the all-in-one cooler side is actually raised out a fraction further towards this side than the actual motherboard. And because it's curved, the further the GPU goes towards the front of the case, the closer it is to failing. So this Aorus 5080 Master is a couple of mil off, and this is 360mm. So I would keep it to 360, 365 max if you want to keep this air duct. Now, if you're buying this case, I'm pretty sure you're going to be buying it to use this air duct. You're going to put an all-in-one cooler in here. That's what you want to use it for. If you take that out, it's just going to be pointless, and you may as well use a different case. So yeah, keep it to 360 or 365. Currently buying Corsair for that because obviously the nocturnal card wasn't available, and I'm actually lucky that I've only got that in the last week or so, and I just happened to throw it in to see how it looked, and it was actually hitting that. So bear in mind, keep that 360 max for that. Now, also an issue with the anti-sag bracket. I did mention that it has limited movement. I'm pretty sure I checked these ones. So it was to do with the end fan on your GPU. So that one spins. This fan spins. I'm using the anti-sag bracket in both of these. But if your fan on your GPU isn't recessed a little bit in the shroud, these two are. I can feel that the shroud is a little bit higher. It's going to be fine. But I tested with that Red Devil Spectral White. The fan is actually out a little bit than the shroud. So because this anti-sag bracket only goes up and down, if it happens to be where your fan is, it's going to go straight up and squish that fan. And I do not recommend running that. You're going to have to go with a third-party anti-sag bracket because it doesn't go sort of forwards or back. It doesn't swivel like some other ones do. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about this case and who it's for. I didn't mention this earlier, but this case is not designed for running a CPU air cooler. I did mention the sort of max clearance for an air cooler, but it is definitely recommended to run an all-in-one cooler, mainly because it's got the dedicated all-in-one cooler chamber. You've got 3 fans at the bottom blowing fresh air straight into that GPU. Normally comes out the GPU. Then you've got the 3 fans at the top blowing out. That's just picking up residual heat from any of the components, and that's it. Now, if you had an air cooler in here, there is no fresh air coming in this chassis to keep that cool. Now, if you remember a week or so ago, I reviewed the Haven BF360. That one was more designed for air cooling because it had the 2 180mm monster fans at the front, had that ramp, 1 fan for the GPU, second fan went straight in for that air cooler you had, and then you could go straight out the rear and then also out the top. But this one is a little bit different, and even Corsair state it's not really designed for air cooling because you're just going to starve. If you put a big fat air cooler in here, you are just going to starve it. Now, you might be wondering, well, if there's no sort of fresh air coming in up here around your motherboard, isn't your motherboard going to get hot? Well, not really. Maybe back in the day running X299 or Workstation, motherboards used to get a bit hot. VRMs got a bit toasty, but VRMs are built so well, and actual CPUs for consumers are coming down in wattage that it doesn't really get that hot now. Priority is to keep your CPU cool, and it's not by keeping it cool in this area. You want to keep the radiator that's running off in the 3rd chamber here as cool as possible, and that's what Corsair's done. Fresh air straight in through the rad, then straight out that back side area, not even coming in here. And then these 3 top fans will just pick up any residual heat in the case. Now, I do want to mention that there's no rear fan support. As you can see, it's very, very small here, and it's kind of deceiving that the case looks very narrow. Like even this GPU sticks out, even this shroud sticks out, but because the main side panel is curved, it starts off at the back, has a bit of glass up here, then it wraps around, and that's where you get that extra width to actually clear all these components, because it doesn't start here because that would chop off this. It actually comes out and curves around. And when I was measuring the GPU water block width, the terminal actually sticks right out, and if you're looking from the back, it sticks out past the side of the case, but it doesn't stick out past the bottom, which is the important part. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about this white build here. Probably not too much to talk about here. This one's more of your, I wouldn't really say basic, but it's more of your traditional all-in-one cooled system. It's running the new 5090 ROG BTF GPU. So as you can see, no actual cable there. It plugs into the motherboard. So I can put that cap back on. And then the motherboard is the new AMD Hero as well. That's the BTF. So no cables on the front, looks super clean. And then that just sort of tied in nicely. And then the Corsair all-in-one cooler in the front. Now, I do want to mention, as I said earlier, no 140mm support. So the bottom, the top, and the side, all 120mm fans only. So 240, 120, and then 360 max. And moving on to this build, when I saw this case at Computex, it's actually funny that this is the same GPU and the same motherboard that they had showcased at Computex earlier this year. And you probably saw it at the start of this video where I was showing some of that footage. But yeah, same type of hardware, but I wanted to take it a step further and run one of these Bits Power Stealth CPU blocks. So the difference with this CPU block is it gets the tubing in and out runs through the pass-through holes on the motherboard. So I've got one over here. You can see the back of it is actually bigger than the main front side of it. And the issue with this is it's not going to work on all cases, especially cases that back connect supported, because normally those have the PSU right behind the motherboard, because the PSU has to go there because you have to allow for room at the top for EPS back connect, down the bottom for all your connections, and that's why the PSU is in the middle. But when I saw this at Computex, I really wanted to do this design, and I think it just looks so clean not having any tubing at all. So first issue I had is with the motherboard cutout for the rear access. This was actually failing, so I had to sort of Dremel a little bit out. That was fine, got this in. And the next thing I had to do was move the PSU, because obviously the PSU was right behind the CPU on the back. That was going to fail this. So I moved the PSU down, probably not ideal because now it didn't line up with the rear sort of vent holes on the side panel. It was down lower. Mind you, I only had 4 or 3 days to do this review, do both of these builds. So I just threw it together to get it finished. Obviously, if I was going to keep this long term, I would revise it. I'd probably use maybe an SFX PSU, something different. I probably could have shifted the PSU more towards the back panel, because you only need this much clearance, and then you can run tubing from either end, or you can run it from this side. Probably not this side if you had the PSU next to it, because you want the clearance so you could run on either side. But I moved it down the bottom, rotated it so the AC plug was at the top. Then I needed to use the Corsair Shift PSU that rotates the ports on the side, because if I used a traditional PSU, I would have had my ports coming out the bottom, so I couldn't do that. So there's quite a few things to do just to get this working, and that's why I just didn't want to do this review and do this build only, because you guys would probably be thinking, well, you pretty much hacked up the whole case. So I thought it was only fair to sort of base my opinions and conclusion on an actual stock build, what this is designed for. But let me know your thoughts on this. If you guys want to try it, go for it. I've got lots of B-roll I'm throwing up to show you the bit I had to Dremel out. Then I made a nice little pass-through plate, a blanking plate, and then just a hole for the AC power plug to go through, plug into the PSU. And then I also had to find a place for the pump res combo, because obviously this one is a custom loop. I still use the Corsair Slim Rad. I used the Corsair braided soft tubing that went to the block at the back, but unlike an all-in-one cooler, I needed to get a dedicated pump res combo. So I then mounted it on this plate that I made at the back. You might be saying I was pretty game to mount it right above the PSU, but that was really the only spot I had for mounting that pump res combo. But yeah, overall, I think both of these builds came out really good, but I just love how aesthetically clean this one looks. Now, when it comes to price, you're looking at $250 US for the RS version. So there's pretty much just two versions, the RS and the LX. So the LX are the newer fans, slightly more expensive, and then the RS are the more affordable fan that you can daisy chain, but you need a converter to run it into the IQ ecosystem. Then the LXR version is $330 US, and that will come with the LX fans. And then both the black and the white are the same price in each version. And then of course you get the reverse fans. I'm kind of wondering why they didn't go with fans at the top. You only get 3. So each model you get just 3 at the bottom, not at the top. Maybe they think if you might have some fans, but pretty much if you get either version, you're either going to scrap those fans. I wouldn't get the LX version if you're going to scrap the LX fans. If you want to use your own fans, probably get the RS version and then scrap those and get your own fans, because they don't do a version without fans. I think it would probably be good if they did a version without fans, and then you could just do whatever you want. But obviously not having 3 at the top, I guess you wouldn't really need to do that, because heat rises, any residual heat is just going to just sort of fade out up the top. Priority is to get the radiator nice and cool, air straight in out the back, and then keep your GPU nice and cool as well. But I think that's it on this video. I don't think it was too long like some of my other ones. Obviously custom water cooling support isn't really a big thing on this case. Seems to be a bit of a trend lately. I had that Haven review last week, was more for air cooling. This one specifically for all-in-one cooling. Maybe cases for custom loops are sort of going on the downhill. I know not everyone is doing custom loops these days because it is quite expensive. But anyway, I do want to thank Corsair for sending these out to review and check out. I want to thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.